Hey guys, what's going on? I'm still in the grips of a reading slump, but I did manage to read another 3 books, first of which being Norwegian Wood by Murakami. This is the second book of his that I've read. Both have been very good, and both have been very depressing. This is a love story of sorts, as this movie tie-in edition indicates. It's about a very serious young man who's going out into the world for the first time after having dealt with death in a very intimate way in high school. He interacts with a smorgasbord of characters, a lot of whom are dealing with death as well, and he sees how the world at large deals with very big, grave issues like that. It's been a long time since I read Catcher in the Rye, but it did remind me a lot of that book, namely with the main character who's kind of fresh and innocent in a way, and being shaped by the world around him, being shaped by the people around him, and learning some unfortunate truths about life in general. The book consisted of a lot of strange first dates, a lot of awkward sexual interactions, some of which were very raunchy, which was consistent with the other book of his that I've read. It seemed that the main character was trying to find meaning in a world where nothing was really sacred, which of course I can relate to, and which is what reminded me of Catcher in the Rye. That is kind of the quote that I was left with after reading that book many, many years ago. The book is titled after a Beatles song, Norwegian Wood. So after I finished the book, I went to YouTube and I listened to it thinking that it would really tie everything together. But it didn't really. I couldn't find much parallel between what the song was saying and what I got out of the book. The main message of the book was really about how people deal with death and tragedy and sadness, all the myriad of ways that people try and deal with it, even though it can't really be dealt with in any kind of a rational sense, as I've talked about before, as Vonnegut talks about all the time, as Philip K. Dick has talked about. And it really makes you want to help people that are dealing with those unfortunate events in their life, which was a good message to leave this book with, but of course not a very cheery one. So I ended this book on a bit of a low. I talked about it in my last video. I think I called it Murakami Malaise, and I picked the absolute worst book I could have to read after that, I'm pretty sure. I had a bunch of leaves in my yard to rake. It takes like 4 or 5 hours to do the whole thing, and I wanted to listen to an audiobook while I did so. So I was scanning my wall of Penguin classics, looking at one that would be popular enough where I would have a lot of audiobook options, but also short enough where I could reasonably listen to most of it in the time it would take me to rake the leaves. And the one that I decided upon, unfortunately, was The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. For those of you that have read this book, you'll know why it was a bad choice. Maybe one of the most depressing books I've ever read. Not that I read it, I listened to it, which was a bit of a blessing because I'm sure I didn't get the full effect of this book by listening to it. But that's fine because I didn't want full comprehension of The Picture of Dorian Gray. It's about a guy, and his one attribute is that he's charismatic, is that he's attractive, and he seems to have a supernatural control over other people because of this. And everyone says he's a very unlikable main character, and of course that's true for most of this book, but at the beginning I feel like he's just kind of impressionable and kind of figuring out this power that he has over other people. But this other character, Lord Henry, is the true villain. He is this cynical, nihilistic philosopher, intellectual type that interjects all of these horrible pieces of dialogue throughout this entire book. And at the beginning, he tells Dorian Gray something to the effect of, yeah, enjoy that while it lasts, because when you get older and when your looks leave you, you will have nothing and people will hate you, and you will look back at this time and say, man, why didn't I do more with that? And that really gets to the main character. And he starts to think, okay, well, what can I do while I still have my good looks? And someone had painted a portrait of him, and he makes this wish that the picture would age instead of him, which comes true. So then he turns into this absolute monster, but all of the atrocities that he commits are instead transferred to this portrait. He stays a beautiful person, but this portrait becomes aged and discolored as he screws people over, essentially. This book reminded me a lot of American Psycho with Christian Bale, a man who is obsessed with his self-image, and that self-image allows him to be an absolute monster in modern society because people can't really see past it. And I think that's something Oscar Wilde was saying in this. He was talking about the irrelevance of your physical appearance and how you present yourself in public. And I know that's ironic to say that on YouTube, where it's all about how you present yourself in this tiny lens and how people see you through a screen. And I wasn't going to talk about this, but as I just saw some news last night about a big YouTuber, a science fiction YouTuber, who was caught doing some unfortunate things. But I commented on his videos, he commented on some of my videos, a lot of people collaborated with him, and I'm sure none of them would expect to hear that kind of thing. But there it is. Completely irrelevant how he presented himself on YouTube and in public. And of course, that's a very depressing thing to think about, which is just one of the many reasons why this was the last book I should have read in my Murakami malaise. But it was interesting to have listened to this book instead of reading it, especially when I was raking leaves, because I couldn't really rewind when I didn't understand something. Because a lot of it is this Lord Henry character influencing Dorian Gray. And the things Lord Henry says are despicable, but they all sound really good. A very charismatic character presented with a lot of enthusiasm with the voice actor that I was listening to. Someone would come up to him saying, "I'm 100% certain that I just found the love of my life and I'm so happy." And Lord Henry would say, well, anything someone believes with 100% certainty is bound to be false. That's just how humans are. It sounds right. And especially when you just hear it and the conversation keeps going and you can't backtrack and say, well, is that actually true? Or can I somehow find optimism in that horribly pessimistic thought? And of course, I was swayed by it, and I was thinking that Lord Henry was a person that knows more about life than I do and was someone worth listening to, but he was just poison. He was poison to everyone that listened to him, including Dorian Gray. And I have a lot of sympathy for Dorian Gray because he was just influenced negatively by that guy's charismatic voice. And again, there is a lot of irony in saying that on YouTube, because there's a lot of people spouting poisonous things on here with a pretty face and a smile, and a lot of fancy editing making them seem influential and powerful and important. Yet another negative train of thought that you can go down to thanks to this book. So yeah, that's why I'm glad I listened to it, and I'm glad I had less involvement in it than I would have if I sat down and read this book. Oh, but of course I do own it, so I skimmed through it a little bit. And look at the introduction here. Look at that little note at the top. Spoiler warning. That's all you gotta do. That's all you gotta do in the introduction, just let people know, hey, if you read this, there will be spoilers. So I appreciated that. Oh, and also, I was going through life thinking that it was a handsome cab, like an attractive cab. It's not handsome, it's handsome cab. Irrelevant, but there you go. There's your fun fact for the video. So after that one, obviously, I was further down than I was after the Murakami malaise, and I went to my shelf trying to find the most innocuous thing I could. Just wanted something lighthearted, something easy breezy, beautiful. So I picked up this fantasy novel. It's called Voyage of the Basilisk, part of this series of books about a fictional dragon biologist, obviously fictional dragon biologist, who goes around this fantasy world and learns about dragons, which I thought was going to be fine. But not my cup of tea, but let's start with the positives. One, it's a beautiful book. I love these tiny hardcovers. It's got a deckled edge. It's got some beautiful illustrations, full page illustrations in this blue ink. And you can see also the text was in blue, which was slightly less legible than normal, but I could excuse it because I did like the aesthetic. One minor gripe I had was that the chapter titles just seemed to be like a rough draft of what was going to be in the chapter. And I stopped reading them after like chapter 4 because I didn't want an outline of what I was about to read. Again, minor gripe. I did try my best to like this book. I think I just have to come to the realization that I'm not a huge fan of fantasy. And apparently I'm not a huge fan of cozy books, or at least I just haven't found my flavor of cozy. But this is part of a bigger series, and I did read the first one a long time ago, and I remember reading it, and I remember it being cozy, but that was more focused on dragons. This one was more focused on political intrigue, which of course I wasn't into because I'm not as acquainted to this fantasy realm. And full transparency, I didn't even finish this book. I stopped with like 30 pages left because it was building up to this climax about a kidnapped princess of some realm, and there was 2 other realms who were involved in trying to find her, and I didn't care about the political intrigue. I wanted to see dragons. I wanted to see the hunt for a big mythical dragon that was terrorizing a realm or something, but that's not what I got. So, clean slate. Those books are done. Put them on my shelf. I'm going to read some sci-fi. I'm going to read some vintage sci-fi, try to get back to something that I enjoy, try and get out of this reading slump. Because, of course, reading slumps are oftentimes fueled by reading books that I don't like. I want to finish this reading challenge strong. I am not going to complete it, but that's fine. I'm just going to try and read as many as I can. Try and read 3 more books by the end of the year. Have 1 more video for you guys. Oh, also, I went to some book sales yesterday. Big hauls. Awesome stuff that I'm excited to show you guys. So I got some review videos coming up. Got some haul videos coming up. Want to do an end of year recap where I rank every book that I read this year during my reading challenge and see what was the best, what was the worst. So unfortunately, I actually will be showcasing these books again at the beginning of that video because it will start from worst to best. But we'll probably try not to spend too much time on those. And as always, thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.